I grew up believing we were just a normal family in suburban Ohio. My parents, Robert and Diana, seemed fair, at least until you looked closer at how they treated my older brother Trevor compared to me. Whatever Trevor wanted, he got. I worked hard, earned scholarships, and was promised the same support for college that Trevor received. But when Trevor needed money for his business idea, suddenly there was nothing left for my education. Now I have a beautiful life with my wife Ellie and our daughter Sophia. But after years of silence, my parents suddenly want back in. Before I share how I finally stood up to my family, after years of unfair treatment, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members. Looking back at my childhood in Westbrook, Ohio, the pattern was always there. I just didn't have the words for it then. Trevor was 5 years older, louder, more demanding of attention, and somehow that translated to him becoming the sun in our family's universe. Everything revolved around Trevor. When Trevor turned 10, my parents rented out the local recreation center, hired a magician, and invited his entire class plus kids from the neighborhood. They spent weeks planning it. For my 10th birthday, 4 years later, I got a small gathering in our backyard with just 3 friends and a store-bought cake that still had the price sticker on the container. When I mentioned the difference, my mother said, "We had less money this year, sweetie." But I overheard them discussing a surprise vacation to Disney for Trevor that same month. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. Trevor got the newest video game systems while I inherited his old ones. He received brand new clothes for school while I wore his hand-me-downs, despite our different builds making them fit poorly. When Trevor made the second string on his high school football team, my parents attended every game, cheering from the stands even when he rarely played. When I won the state science competition, neither could attend because Trevor needed help moving into his new apartment. None of this made Trevor a bad person. He was just doing what our parents had taught him to do: expect preferential treatment. As a child, I didn't understand it. As a teenager, I resented it. As an adult, I came to recognize it as a damaging family dynamic that wasn't my fault. Despite minimal support from my parents, I excelled academically. I took every advanced placement course my high school offered, joined academic clubs, and worked weekends at the local hardware store. By senior year, I had saved nearly $4,000 and secured a partial scholarship to State University for engineering. It would cover about 40% of my tuition. When I was accepted, my parents seemed genuinely proud. They promised to help with the remaining costs, just as they had for Trevor, who had attended the same university for business administration. I remember my father saying, "Your hard work paid off, Lewis. Well, take care of the rest. Don't worry about the money." That first year went smoothly. My parents deposited money into my account each semester as promised. I maintained a 4 gigapascals while working part-time at the campus bookstore to cover my personal expenses. I called home weekly, sharing my experiences and academic achievements. For once, I felt like my parents were keeping their promise to support me equally. Then came my sophomore year. Just before the fall semester, Trevor, now 27 and working at an insurance company, announced he wanted to start his own business. Handcrafted modern furniture was his passion, he declared, at a family dinner despite having no woodworking experience. He needed startup capital for equipment, materials, and a workshop space. My parents were immediately captivated. My father kept saying, "This could be huge," and my son, the entrepreneur. My mother gushed about how Trevor would be the next big thing in furniture design. That weekend, they took him to tour potential workshop spaces. 2 weeks later, just 3 days before my tuition payment was due, my mother called. There was an unusual hesitation in her voice. "Lewis, honey, something has come up," she began. "Your father and I have decided to invest in Trevor's business. It's a really promising opportunity." "Okay," I said, waiting for her to continue. "The thing is, we put in most of our savings," she continued, "and we also took out a home equity line." She paused. "We're not going to be able to help with your tuition this semester." The shock hit me like a physical blow. "What? But you promised. The payment is due this week. We know and we're sorry, but this opportunity for Trevor couldn't wait." Maybe you can take out some student loans. Everyone does these days. I sat in stunned silence in my dorm room, the weight of her words sinking in. After a long pause, I asked, "How much did you give him?" There was another uncomfortable silence. $175,000. My partial scholarship was worth $12,000 per year. My parents had been contributing about $15,000 annually. They had given Trevor more than 5 years' worth of my entire education costs. "But you'll find a way, Lewis." "You always do," she added, as if my history of self-reliance justified their abandonment. "You're so good with money and responsibility." Those words would echo in my mind for years to come. My responsibility had become my punishment. Trevor's irresponsibility had become his reward. The next week was a blur of panic. I rushed to the financial aid office pleading for emergency assistance. I applied for every loan I could find, eventually securing funding at high interest rates, due to the last-minute nature of the applications. I picked up a second job waiting tables at a local restaurant, working until midnight before returning to my engineering coursework. That semester I barely slept 4 hours a night. My once perfect GPA slipped to a 3.7, still respectable, but the first tangible cost of my new reality. Meanwhile, my parents' social media pages filled with proud photos of Trevor's new workshop, expensive equipment, and the small but trendy sign for handcrafted modern furniture. During winter break, I stayed at school to work extra shifts rather than go home. When spring semester tuition came due, there was no call from my parents, no offer of help. They had made their choice clear. I was on my own. By graduation 3 years later, I had maintained my 3.8 gigapascals while working 30 hours weekly, but I had accumulated $78,000 in student loan debt. My parents and Trevor attended my graduation ceremony, arriving late and leaving early because Trevor had an important client meeting. They brought me a card with $50 inside, with a note saying, "So proud of you. We knew you could do it on your own." The final straw came a week after graduation. I drove home to collect some childhood belongings before moving for my new job. I overheard my parents in the kitchen discussing another $40,000 loan to help Trevor through a slow first year in business. When I entered the room, they quickly changed the subject. Over dinner, I finally gathered the courage to address the elephant in the room. "Why did you fund Trevor's entire business but force me into debt for the education you promised to help with?" My father looked uncomfortable. The business was a time-sensitive investment opportunity. "So was my education," I countered. "Don't be so sensitive, Lewis," my mother said. "Stop being jealous of your brother's ambition. At least he tried to create something." I looked at them, these people who had raised me, and realized they would never see the injustice. In their eyes, Trevor would always deserve more simply because head always received more. I left that night, declining their offer to stay over. It would be the last time I entered their home for many years. The years after graduation tested my resilience in ways I never expected. My entry-level engineering job paid reasonably well, but after student loan payments, I had little left. I rented the smallest studio apartment I could find in a neighborhood where police sirens were a nightly soundtrack. My furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor, a folding table, and a single chair. Each month I sent nearly 40% of my take-home pay to various loan servicers. I brought lunch to work every day, never ate at restaurants, and hadn't bought new clothes since college. While friends went on vacations and bought homes, I created elaborate spreadsheets tracking every dollar, projecting how long it would take to become debt-free. Through mutual college friends, I occasionally heard about Trevor and his business. My parents had continued investing, helping him expand to a larger workshop and hire 2 employees. Their social media showed proud posts about their son, the business owner, while my achievements at work went unmentioned. During a work conference in Chicago, I met Ellie. She was presenting on architectural engineering solutions, and I was immediately drawn to her confidence and brilliance. We exchanged business cards, and I surprised myself by following up with an email the next day. Our early dates were budget-conscious coffee meetings and walks in the park. I was ashamed of my financial situation, afraid she'd see me as irresponsible or unsuccessful. For months, I avoided any discussion of family or finances, steering conversations toward work or her interests. 6 months into our relationship, sitting on a park bench on a crisp fall day, Ellie asked why she had never met my family. The question opened a floodgate. For hours, I shared everything. The childhood favoritism, the broken promises, the crushing debt, and my estrangement from my parents. When I finished, I braced myself for her judgment. Instead, she took my hand and shared her own story of family complexity, parents who divorced bitterly when she was 12, using her as a messenger between households, leaving her with her own emotional scars. That day created a new level of intimacy between us. We were two people who understood that family could be both a source of pain and an opportunity to do better. A year later, I proposed with a modest ring I'd saved for by taking on freelance engineering projects. We planned a small wedding that fit my careful budget, inviting only close friends and immediate family. My parents RSVP'd yes, though I hadn't spoken to them beyond holiday texts in over 2 years. Our wedding day was mostly perfect. Ellie was radiant, our friends supportive, and the small reception at a local restaurant was filled with genuine joy. My parents arrived on time, but seemed uncomfortable bringing a generic card with a check that didn't begin to match what we'd learned they'd given for Trevor's business expenses that same month. Trevor arrived an hour late, already intoxicated. During his unwelcome toast, he slurred references to being surprised I'd found someone given how boring I was compared to him. Later, I overheard my parents in the hallway discussing how they might need to sell some investments to loan Trevor another $50,000 to keep the business afloat. The next morning, over breakfast with just Ellie, I made the decision to cut contact entirely. This would be our family now, I told her, gesturing between us. We would build something healthier than what I came from. Those first years of marriage were challenging but strengthening. We lived in a small apartment, both working long hours. Ellie understood and supported my aggressive debt repayment plan. We celebrated small victories together, a promotion at work, refinancing my loans to a lower rate, our first vacation, after 3 years of Mariaga camping trip, rather than the resort we dreamed of. Through dedication and countless sacrifices, we finally reached debt freedom, 7 years after graduation. The day I made the final payment, Ellie surprised me with champagne and a homemade cake decorated with a broken chain. That night, we began discussing starting a family, something we had postponed until we were financially stable. 9 months later, our daughter Sophia was born. Holding her in the hospital, I made a silent promise that she would never doubt her worth or feel she had to earn her parents' love. We would create the stable, loving family it never had. As Sophia grew into a bright, curious toddler, we built the life we wanted. I advanced at work, eventually becoming a department director. Ellie returned to her career part-time, maintaining her professional identity while being present for Sophia. We bought a modest but comfortable home in a good school district. We were secure, happy, and healing. Through distant relatives and occasional social media glimpses, I learned that Trevor's business was struggling severely. Despite multiple cash infusions from my parents, he hadn't turned a profit in 5 years. The handcrafted furniture market had proven more competitive than expected, and Trevor's lack of experience resulted in production problems and customer complaints. Then came the news that stunned me. My parents had sold their home of 30 years to cover Trevor's business debts and tax liabilities. They'd moved to a small apartment and taken retail jobs in their 60s. My reaction surprised me. Rather than vindication, I felt a complex sadness for all the waste of money, relationships, and opportunities for genuine connection. 3 years passed with no direct contact. Ellie and I sent birth announcements and Christmas cards to my parents' address, but received no response. I assumed they had made their choice, just as I had made mine. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, an email from my mother appeared in my inbox. The notification popped up during a team meeting. My mother's name, which I hadn't seen in my inbox for years, caused me to lose track of the discussion entirely. I excused myself as soon as the meeting concluded and found a quiet conference room to read the message. Dear Lewis, I hope this email finds you well. Your father and I have been thinking about you a lot lately. We saw the Christmas photos you sent of little Sophia. She looks so much like you did at that age. We'd like to reconnect. Family is too important to stay apart forever. We'd especially love to meet our granddaughter. Perhaps we could get together soon. Love, Mom. No mention of the years of silence. No acknowledgement of why we were estranged. Just a casual invitation, as if we'd had a minor disagreement last week. I sat staring at my screen, conflicting emotions washing over me. Part of me wanted to delete the message immediately. Another part, the little boy who had always sought his parents' approval, felt a flicker of hope that perhaps things could be different. That evening, I showed the email to Ellie as we cleaned up after dinner. "What do you think?" she asked, carefully neutral. I honestly don't know. Part of me wonders if it's about Sophia, or if they're in financial trouble and looking for help. Ellie nodded. Those are fair questions. Would meeting with them help you get answers? After much discussion, we agreed that it'd meet my parents, Aloneno, Sofiat, a cafe, halfway between our homes. Ellie supported reconnection if it was healthy, but was protective of Sophia being introduced to potentially toxic relationships. I'd been seeing a therapist for the past year, working through my childhood experiences and their impact on my parenting. Dr. Winters had helped me understand that my parents' behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth. When I mentioned the email in our session, she suggested approaching the meeting with clear boundaries and moderate expectations. The day of our meeting arrived. I chose a busy cafe where we wouldn't be tempted to create a scene. I arrived early, selecting a table with a good view of the entrance. When my parents walked in, the sight of them was jarring. They had aged dramatically. My father, once robust and confident, now moved with a stooped shuffle. My mother, who had always taken pride in her appearance, looked tired, her clothes inexpensive and worn. They spotted me and approached with uncertain smiles. "Louis," my mother said, reaching to hug me. I accepted the embrace stiffly. "Son." My father nodded, extending his hand. His grip was weaker than I remembered. We ordered coffee and exchanged awkward pleasantries. They asked about my job, and I provided minimal details about my recent promotion. They mentioned the weather and changes in the old neighborhood. For 20 minutes we performed this dance of shallow conversation, avoiding any meaningful topics. Finally, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. "We brought some pictures of the family to share," she said. "Maybe you could show them to Sophia someday." I glanced at the album, but didn't open it. "That would depend on a lot of things." My father cleared his throat. "We were hoping we could meet her soon. Maybe this weekend. There's something we need to address before that could happen," I said carefully. "We haven't spoken in years. You haven't acknowledged why." My mother looked down at her coffee. "Families go through rough patches, Louis, but blood is thicker than water." "Is it?" I asked, because it seemed like money was thicker than blood when it came to supporting my education. The atmosphere chilled instantly. "That was a complicated time," my father said defensively. My mother jumped in. "We made the best decision we could with the information we had. Trevor's business was a real opportunity." "And how did that work out?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger rising inside me. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. My father sighed heavily. "Not well. The economy changed. Competition was fierce." My mother touched his arm supportively. "Trevor tried his best. He just had some bad luck." Something inside me shifted. After all these years, they were still making excuses for Trevor while minimizing my experiences. "I understand you've had financial difficulties," I said. "I heard about the house." My father flinched. My mother stiffened. "We're managing," my father said. "We downsized," my mother added quickly. "We're in a nice little apartment now. Your father works at the hardware store, and I have a job at the mall." I nodded, waiting. The real purpose of this meeting was still unspoken. After another uncomfortable silence, my father sighed. "Truthfully, Louis, we're struggling. Trevor's business finally closed last year. He has some issues with alcohol now. He's staying with us until he gets back on his feet." My mother reached across the table toward my hand, which I subtly moved away. "We've heard you're doing very well. Vice President at your company now homeowner beautiful family. And there it was. The subtext became text. Are you asking me for money? I asked bluntly. No, of course not. My mother protested too quickly. But family helps family. We thought perhaps now that you're established we could all reconnect. Maybe you'll want to help your brother eventually once you've rebuilt our relationship. The audacity was breathtaking. Years of silence, only to reappear when they thought I might be useful. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. I took a sip of my now cold coffee and set it down deliberately. I'd like to share some things you might not know. From my briefcase, I removed a folder containing loan statements, payment histories, and a spreadsheet I'd prepared. After you abandoned your promise to help with my education, I accumulated $78,000 in student loan debt. I paid off the last of it 4 years ago, after 7 years of working multiple jobs and living in an apartment where there were 2 shootings on my block. I slid the documents across the table. During that time, you gave Trevor nearly $300,000 for his business, according to public records I found when his company filed for bankruptcy. You never once asked if I needed help. They stared at the papers silent. When Ellie and I got married, we could only afford a small ceremony. You gave us a $200 check as a gift. That same month, according to Aunt Susan, you paid $10,000 to cover Trevor's back rent and car payment. My mother began to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. When Sophia was born, we sent you an announcement with our phone number. You never called, but you found my email quickly enough when you needed something. I closed the folder and looked them directly in the eyes. I don't say this out of bitterness, but so you'll understand why I have boundaries now. I spent years trying to earn your love and support. I now understand that wasn't my responsibility as your child. My father had turned pale. My mother had tears streaming down her face. We never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Intent doesn't change impact, I replied, quoting my therapist. The truth is you're only here because you're hoping for financial support. But here's the truth bomb you're not expecting. I would have helped you if you'd simply acknowledged the past and apologized. I would have helped you not because you deserved it, but because I'm not the kind of person who abandons family in need. They sat in stunned silence as I continued. The irony is that I established a college fund for Sophia the day she was born. It's structured as an irrevocable trust that can't be accessed for any purpose except her education. Not by me, not by Ellie, and certainly not by extended family. I did this specifically because I never want her to experience what I did. I stood up, placing enough cash on the table to cover all our coffees. If you'd like to meet Sophia someday, these are my terms. Family counseling with me first, a genuine acknowledgement of the past, and a commitment to treating her with the unconditional love that all children deserve. If you're interested in that path, email me. If you're just looking for financial support, I suggest you reconsider your approach with Trevor instead. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a weight lifting that I'd carried for decades. I'd finally spoken my truth, not with rage, but with the calm certainty of someone who knew his own worth. The days following our confrontation passed in a strange haze. I felt both lighter and unsettled, as if I'd disturbed something long buried. Ellie noticed the change in me, commenting that I seemed more present, less guarded. 2 weeks after the cafe meeting, an email arrived from my father, not my mother. The shift in correspondent was itself significant. Lewis, this is difficult to write. Your mother and I have had many long conversations since we saw you. Your words were hard to hear, but we needed to hear them. You were right about why we reached out. We did hope your success might translate to financial help. I'm ashamed to admit that now. What you said about Sophia's college fund hit home particularly hard. You found a way to break the pattern, to ensure she would never experience what you did. That shows character we failed to recognize. If you're still open to it, we would like to try family counseling. Not because we expect anything material from you, but because we missed too many years already. Dad, I showed the email to Ellie, who read it thoughtfully. It's a start, she said. But actions will matter more than words. I agreed, and with cautious optimism, arranged a session with Dr. Winters, who agreed to facilitate a family meeting. To my surprise, both my parents attended, arriving early and visibly nervous. Those first sessions were painful. My father struggled to express emotions, falling back on excuses about good intentions. My mother wept, frequently alternating between genuine remorse and defensive justifications. Dr. Winters skillfully guided us, helping my parents see the patterns they had created and maintained. By our fourth session, my father made a breakthrough. Looking directly at me, he said, "We failed you as parents. We convinced ourselves that Trevor needed more, but the truth is he was just louder in asking. You deserve the same support. I am truly sorry, son." It wasn't everything, but it was something real. A beginning. After 2 months of regular counseling, I agreed to a short supervised visit with Sophia. We met at a playground where my parents watched awkwardly as their granddaughter climbed and slid with boundless energy. They had brought a small stuffed elephant, checking with Ellie first if it was acceptable. I observed them carefully, noting how they interacted with Sophia with genuine interest rather than the performative affection they had often shown with Trevor. The most unexpected development came 3 months after our first counseling session. Trevor called me directly. "Louis, it's Trevor," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Mom and Dad told me what happened. What you've been doing with the counseling and all that." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "I owe you an apology, man," he continued. "I knew what they were doing back then. I knew they were using your college money for my business. I let it happen because I was selfish." His honesty surprised me. I didn't know what to say. "I'm 6 weeks sober," he added. "One of the steps is making amends. I can't repay the money, not anytime soon anyway. But I needed you to know I'm sorry." We talked for nearly an hour, the longest genuine conversation we'd had as adults. He was working as a carpenter, now using the skills he'd developed during his failed business venture. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. His craftsmanship was actually excellent. It was the business management he'd failed at. The healing process was neither quick nor linear. There were setbacks, a tense Thanksgiving where old patterns briefly resurfaced, an argument when my mother made an insensitive comparison between Sophia and Trevor as children, moments when I questioned whether reconciliation was worth the emotional effort. But there were also unexpected gifts. My father taught Sophia to fish at a local pond, showing a patience I didn't know he possessed. My mother knitted Sophia a blanket, working on it for months despite her arthritis. Trevor built her a custom bookshelf, his way of contributing something positive to her life. A year after that cafe confrontation, we gathered for Sophia's 4th birthday. It was a small party at our home, nothing extravagant, but filled with genuine joy. Watching my father help Sophia blow out her candles, I reflected on the complex journey we'd traveled. The truth bomb I dropped that day in the cafe hadn't just been about exposing their motivations. It had been about disrupting patterns that had persisted for generations. By standing firm in my truth, I had created the possibility of something different, not just for me, but for all of us. My parents would never be perfect. Our relationship would always carry the scars of the past. But by demanding respect and setting clear boundaries, it found a way to include them in our lives without sacrificing my self-worth or my daughter's well-being. Have you ever had to confront family members about unfair treatment? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that heal us the most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating difficult family dynamics. And if you know someone struggling with similar issues, share this video to let them know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that can ultimately lead to healthier relationships for everyone involved.